Multinational companies increasingly rely on tight global coordination. Being able to sync operations spanning the globe gives them a distinct competitive edge. But there is a persistent obstacle to this harmony. Despite advances in logistics and technology, language remains the unyielding barrier preventing seamless global coordination. Before a company can even begin to formulate a management strategy, executives have to step back and measure the exact magnitude of the language gap confronting them. Doing this accurately requires breaking the problem down into 3 specific dimensions of assessment. First is language diversity, the sheer volume of distinct languages navigated globally. Second is language penetration, how far down the corporate hierarchy a language must reach. Finally, language sophistication evaluates the exact complexity of the required technical vocabulary. Every multinational has a unique profile based on these 3 metrics. That specific combination dictates exactly which strategic option management needs to select. The simplest and most common early approach is relying on a lingua franca. For companies based in the US or UK, this means running the entire global operation exclusively in their native English. This attitude was standard practice for decades. A 1991 survey showed that over a third of British exporting companies relied entirely on English when dealing with foreign clients. That one-language-fits-all assumption persisted right into the early internet age. Surveys of top American corporations during that era found that over half provided 0 foreign language access on their websites. This chart shows the historical share of English language dominance in global e-commerce. As the internet rapidly globalized over the last 3 decades, the percentage of transactions, emails, and web traffic conducted purely in English steadily diminished. Relying on a single language introduces a severe operational flaw. It ignores the rise of linguistic nationalism. In emerging and dominant markets across Asia, South America, and the Middle East, buyers are increasingly asserting their right to conduct business strictly in the language of the customer. The sheer economic vitality of languages like Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese makes them a direct challenge to the historical dominance of English. This creates an immediate risk during negotiations. Total reliance on a single language leaves the English-speaking party completely vulnerable when operating outside their native tongue. The vulnerability becomes a distinct legal liability when it comes to the paperwork. Contracts, regional rules, and legislation are almost invariably written in the local language of the jurisdiction. A lingua franca approach forces the customer to adapt to the supplier. What begins as an internal operational convenience for the multinational turns into a massive legal blind spot. Another highly improvised response to the language barrier is known as functional multilingualism. Essentially, this means muddling through. It relies on the parties using whatever means are at their disposal to communicate, mixing partial languages, pidgins, and physical gestures. In a purely social setting, this shared effort to understand one another can actually aid team bonding, often resulting in moments of absurdity and humor. Yet it remains surprisingly common in commercial settings. Studies by Hagen indicate that 16% of all international business transactions are conducted in this exact cocktail of languages. But the humor fades when money is on the line. As a basis for formal business negotiations, this hit-and-miss method breaks down. It introduces a high probability of cognitive divergence. Because both parties are relying on fractured communication, they often walk away from the table with entirely different understandings of the exact same agreement. Functional multilingualism relies on assumption and guesswork. That makes it an unacceptable foundation for establishing binding corporate contracts. A much more rational response to these barriers is to employ external resources, like professional translators and simultaneous interpreters. But this approach is expensive. Top simultaneous interpreters command daily rates on par with senior partners at international consulting firms. Cost aside, there is a strict operational obstacle. For an interpreter to be fully effective, they must understand the deep technical context of the subject matter they are translating. In practice, that context is rarely provided. The topic may be too specialized, there might be a lack of preparation time, or the negotiating parties may simply be reluctant to explain their wider business strategy to an outsider. Without that background, the source messages are often filled with ambiguity and cultural overtones. The interpreter is forced to use their own initiative and guesswork to fill in the blanks. This exposes the ultimate flaw of outsourced translation, a distinct loss of rhetorical power. Every message is filtered through a third party. A direct translation of words cannot fully convey the spirit of a communication. The crucial soft skills of business, persuasion, the nuance of a counteroffer, or even strategic humor are heavily diluted. Interpreters can provide high-fidelity word translation, but they place a permanent, unpredictable filter between a company and its prospective business partners. The most direct reaction to a skills shortage is internal personnel development. Language training programs are readily available at almost every level. However, many companies fail at this because they treat training as a tactical luxury tied to the economic cycle. When budgets get tight, language courses are often the first expense to be cut. Studies show a massive disparity between a firm's good intentions to conduct future training and their actual historical delivery. Consistency is rare. One corporation that has maintained that consistency is the Volkswagen Group. Their long-term approach serves as the definitive model for professional, strategic language management. The Volkswagen program is structurally rigorous. Progressing from basic knowledge to communications competence requires completing 6 distinct language stages. Each stage demands 90 hours of coursework and heavy self-study. Advancing requires passing a formal achievement test after every stage. The ultimate timeline reflects the true scale of the task. Even this highly managed program requires a minimum of 3 years of intensive study to produce a single functionally bilingual engineer or accountant. Unless an employee is taking a brief brush-up course for a language they already know, internal training cannot be treated as a quick fix. Effective language management requires foresight. To survive in a global market, companies must treat language training as a multi-year commitment that persists through every economic cycle. If you're looking to make the IELTS Focus, they are a dedicated English center specializing in IELTS preparation. You can contact them on Zalo at 084-770-5973 to start your training.